Welcome to Vodka 101, hosted by John Vellinga. John is the founder and CEO of Multicultural Bevco and the co-creator and owner of Slava Ultra Premium Vodka and Zirkova Vodka. John is a systems design industrial engineer with 25 years of experience in industry. He and his wife Catherine worked extensively in developing statistical process control and advanced production methods for the beverage alcohol industry. John co-created Slava Ultra Premium Vodka. In the process, John learned just about all there is to know about the key factors in producing a vodka to get the exact taste and result desired. He is a sought-after speaker on the subject of vodka and has trained product consultants for several liquor stores, companies, and provincial liquor boards.
Hi, I'm John Vellinga, and welcome to Vodka 101. Today we're actually going to try and do three things for you. First of all, we're going to teach you a little bit about the origins and how vodka is made. And then we're going to bust some of the many myths and gimmicks that are out there. And in the process, what we're hopefully going to do is turn you into a vodka snob so you can impress all of your friends with your encyclopedic knowledge of vodka. So what we're going to begin with is, how is vodka made? What's the process for making this amazing clear liquid that is the most popular spirit in North America? Well, the first step in making vodka is to take a mash of ingredients, boil them in water or brew them to create what's called a wort. That is then fermented using yeast, like any kind of fermentation process, up to about 8% alcohol. It's a lot like making beer. The next step then, of course, 8% is not strong enough for vodka, so we distill it up to 92% alcohol, which is obviously too strong for vodka. So we cut it or blend it with water and react it by heating it up to about 60 degrees Celsius, which allows the alcohol and the water to bond together better. We then filter the finished product, add softening agents, and voila, you have vodka at 40% alcohol, which is considered ideal. But the four things that matter the most in making vodka are the mash ingredients, or what it's made out of, distillation method, the water, and filtration. And we're going to go into those in a little bit more detail each. But first we're going to talk about the origins of vodka. Well, the origins of vodka and its history are a bit of a sketchy topic, and there's not a lot of information on it. And most of what we know goes back to a very extraordinary event in 1977. The Russians and the Poles have been arguing for years over who invented vodka, and it all goes back to geography. It was about 6 centuries ago, and in 1977, the Polish government actually sued the Soviet Union for the exclusive rights to the word vodka. And they had a whole bunch of information, anthropological, archaeological, that insisted that vodka was invented in a place called Cherkaska, which at the time was part of a greatly expanded Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. But today, Cherkaska is Cherkasy, and it's about 200 kilometers south of Kiev in the central part of Ukraine. So people always ask me, John, then was it the Poles or the Ukrainians that invented vodka? And my answer to them is yes. The Cherkasy region is the birthplace of vodka, and it also happens to be the place where Slava Ultra Premium Vodka is made. So in 1896, the Tsar built 3 vodka plants, one in Moscow, one in Kiev, and one in the little village of Zolotonosha, which was literally in the middle of nowhere in the Cherkasy region. Now, why on earth would they build a vodka plant in the middle of nowhere? Well, that actually brings us to one of the 4 things that make vodka really important, and that's the water that goes into it. Zolotonosha is famous for its source of artesian mineral water. The water for making vodka needs to come out of the ground. It has to be mineralized a particular way. And this is also the source of the first few gimmicks about vodka, and that's the water. You've heard of romantic places that water comes from: glaciers, icebergs, mountain streams. But of course, anyone who's been to Lake Louise, it's a beautiful place, but they know you can't really drink the water. So that is a bit of gimmickry, and it doesn't really mean anything. What is most important is to have an excellent source of artesian water. The other key thing about making vodka is, what is it made out of? What is the mash made out of? Now, most people think that vodka is actually made out of potatoes, and actually very rarely is that true. It's very difficult to make an excellent potato vodka. Vodka can be made out of all kinds of things. In North America, it's mostly made out of corn because it's plentiful and cheap. But the best vodkas are made with rye and wheat. Yes, it's more expensive. And it's no wonder that in Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe, they would have figured out, with all that grain lying around, what to do with it and how to make vodka. Obviously, distillation is key to making vodka. This is actually a picture of a vodka distillery with rectification columns. They're called tall columns. And what we do is we actually boil that fermented wort at the bottom of this column, and up in the column at various levels, that alcohol, those spirits start to condense. Now we always get rid of the heads and the tails, but one of the things that makes our vodka truly special is that we take what's called the center cut. The center cut, or sometimes called the sweet spot, are the sweetest, nicest spirits. The lighter spirits cause a medicinal aroma, while the heavier spirits cause a burn on the palate. So let's try and see what that experience is like. This is an ordinary vodka, here's Slava, and when we smell it, we notice that medicinal aroma coming off of this, and that's the light alcohols. When we look at Slava, no medicinal aroma at all, but you get a very nice, flavorful, there's something going on there. You can actually smell toasted wheat, maybe a little hint of vanilla. So there's a real taste there. And when we try this in the mouth, you're going to get some side palate and mid palate burn right away, almost like a mouthwash. This is the heavy alcohol working. Not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people like vodka with a kick. But the important thing too with Slava was, not only does it smell nice, extremely cold and very smooth, absolutely no palate burn, just a nice warm glow and a very, very long finish. That's the absence of the light and the heavy alcohols, allowing all of that flavor to come through without the burn and without the smell. Well, not only are we taking the center cut, we're actually redistilling the center cut each time, taking the center cut of the center cut of the center cut, so that finally, out of all the distillate that comes out, only about a quarter or a fifth are good enough to be called Luke's grade, and that's what goes into Slava. The rest of it is mixed together in about a 2.5 to 3 times distilled mixture called extra. And what this also means is that we're making our vodka in a batch, small batch process rather than a continuous process. The way most vodka is made, especially in North America, is they simply, in a continuous process, keep redistilling maybe 2 or 3 times so that there's a single grade of spirits that then goes on to make whiskey if it's aged, gin if it's flavored, or if it's filtered, it makes vodka. Sort of a fully continuous industrial process. So now we come to another myth. As people always say, John, well, if 4 times distilled is better than 3 times distilled, shouldn't 6 or 7 times distilled be even better? Well, that's yet another gimmick. The thing about vodka is, distill it too few times and it's not smooth enough. Distill it too many times and it loses all of its character. Every single time spirits are distilled, yes, they become a little bit smoother, but there's a diminishing return after about 4 times. But every single time it's distilled, we give up a little bit of character and flavor, which is why Scotch is never more than 2 or 2.5 times distilled, because character is so important. What we found that for vodka, 4 times is the perfect balance between smoothness and character. So that brings us to the fourth and final most important thing about vodka, and that's filtration. After the water and alcohol have been combined, we have to filter it. Now, most vodka plants, what you'll see is about water cooler sized charcoal filters, and maybe 5 or 10 of those on the wall. And what they do is they puff charcoal dust in to sort of accelerate that process and then filter it out in these filters on the wall. But what's really, really special in this vodka plant in Zolotonosha are the giant filtration tanks. Rather than around 10 kilograms, they're going through 2,000 kilograms of charcoal. But rather than actually purifying this more aggressively, what in fact is happening is that it's being very delicate with it. It's not under a great deal of pressure. It goes through these massive 2.5-story tall columns, which purify it, but that don't rip and bleach out all of the flavor. So that's how you end up with Slava having that wonderful nose and that long finish. Part of it is that we haven't destroyed all of the character that we went to so much trouble to put into it in the first place. So now what we're going to do is we're going to show you how all alcoholic beverages in the world relate together and where vodka fits in among them. We call this the spirits world, and it all begins with this thing called fermentation that was discovered long ago, almost by accident. If you were to take a grain mash or a potato mash and ferment that into a wort, or if you did the same thing with barley and you did that and added hops, you'd end up with beer. So everything on here that is red is a finished product. If you did that with barley malt and you didn't add hops, you'd end up with a malt. If we distill this stuff, this wort, we end up with something called vodka. Very simple. It's the basic white spirit. Gin is simply a type of flavored vodka, juniper and botanically infused. There's other kinds of flavored vodkas. If we take this stuff, this malt, and distill it, we end up with something called new make spirit. Not something you want to drink, but there's this other thing about spirits we call aging. So if we were to age this stuff, vodka, we'd end up with Canadian or Irish whiskey, which for all intents and purposes is just a aged vodka. Aged new make spirit is Scotch whiskey. Take the same thing, grape juice ferments into wine, distill it into eau de vie. Age it, and you end up with brandy, or if you're in France, cognac or armagnac. Same thing with grappa. We take sugars or molasses and ferment them and then distill them into white rum, age them into dark rum. Same with tequila, with agave. We distill it into silver tequila and we age it into añejos and reposados. Now, the implication of that is that with vodka, you have to make it right in the first place. Aging it makes no difference. It has to be done properly at the beginning. The other implication is that vodka is the least expensive of all the spirits to make. The reason being is it's done the moment it's distilled. So the ugly little secret is vodka should never really cost that much money. Slava, at just over $30, is about as expensive as it gets. We couldn't have spent more money on the liquid. But so why are some vodkas over $40, $50, sometimes up to $100? What's up with that? Well, the taxes on alcohol are the same, whether it's cheap and expensive vodka or ultra premium. But yes, it does cost a little bit more to make a vodka like Slava or other ultra premium. So that 4 times distilled center cut, that's the quality of the vodka. So a little bit more, $6, $7 more than ordinary vodka, that's why Slava costs a little bit more. But the really big price difference here is typically packaging. 4-color, frosted, silkscreen, fancy bottles with corks, that would have added about $20 to the price of Slava. We decided to stick with the liquid. It's what's in the bottle that matters. It's not perfume, it's vodka. So thank you for listening to Vodka 101 today. Hopefully you learned something new, that it was of value to you, and that you're now a vodka snob and a connoisseur and can impress all of your friends with your encyclopedic knowledge. Please also feel free to download the PDF text version of this presentation. And if you're interested, we also do live Vodka 101s. Send us an email at info@slavavodka.com for more details. Have a great day.